Good morning and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. I suspect it was a pretty tight fit, and what's more, pretty uncomfortable too. This week we're talking about the story of Jonah, and we're hoping to discover a little bit more throughout the story than just the fact that Jonah was swallowed by a fish. Nevertheless, the fact that Jonah was swallowed by a fish is part of that story, and that's the part I want to talk about today. In our world today, we tend to want to say that Jonah was swallowed by a whale, because that's what we think of as the largest fish we know, in spite of the fact that it's really a mammal. Science will tell you, however, that a large whale like that has a very narrow throat, and that whales actually live on small sea animals like plankton. So not only wouldn't they swallow a person, they literally can't. What's more important for our purpose is that the Bible doesn't say it was a whale. Rather, the Bible says it was a large fish. Sometimes I think we picture a Disney cartoon when we think of Jonah. Disney portrayed the story of Pinocchio, and toward the end, as Pinocchio searches for Geppetto, he's swallowed by a whale and finds Geppetto in the whale's stomach. They walk around, have lights, there's even part of the ship there in the whale's stomach. But that's not what I think Jonah experienced and found in the belly of that fish. I think it was tight, confining, dark, and frightening. And perhaps that's the point that we've often overlooked. Things were bad for Jonah. In fact, it's hard to imagine how it could get much worse. There in the belly of the fish, there's not much room for hope. He fled from God, and it has ended up that all is lost. And as far as he knows, he is lost too. For 3 days, he's lost in that confining, fearful darkness. All he has to think about are his choices, who he is, how he chose to flee from God's call, how he can't depend on himself there in the belly of the fish. And the only thing he can depend on is God. Another way to say that is that there in the belly of that fish, Jonah doesn't die, but he does die to himself. Jonah dies to himself and rises to life in God. That's really what his prayer in the belly of the fish is about. Jonah realizes who he is, and more importantly, who God is. And Jonah is changed. All this is really what baptism is about. In baptism, we die to ourselves and rise to new life in God. Our old, fleeing away from God's selves have passed away, and we become new in and for God. Swallowed by and languishing in the belly of our sin, we find that we can't depend on ourselves, but only on God. And there's one more thing at this point. If you're paying attention, you might have noticed an interesting connection right there. Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days, the same amount of time Jesus was in the tomb. And when Jonah was spewed out, there was new life for Jonah. And when Jesus rose, there was a new beginning and a new life for all the world. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.